Welcome back, friends, to another night of 13 Nights of Tiki Frights. I am your host, Gabriel Bascom from The Search for Tiki. Thank you for tuning in again. As always, we're sponsored by Plantation Rum. Plantation Rum sponsors 13 Nights of Tiki Frights, all the cocktails, the giveaways, everything. We couldn't put it on without them. So huge mahalo nui to Plantation Rum. Guys, we got a very special guest tonight. We're going to be giving away this Zombie Creech mug Bayou edition from Freaky Deaky Tiki. Freaky Deaky Tiki is also our guest tonight. We're going to be talking to him about monsters and Halloween and mug making, slip casting, mold making, all kinds of really cool stuff regarding cocktail mugs. And at the end of the video, we're going to give away this Zombie Creech mug to one lucky winner. So take a good look. And then also, tomorrow night, in less than 24 hours, we're going to be putting our limited edition Catable cocktail mug on sale. Now, Catable will go on sale at 6 o'clock Pacific time, 9 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow night. That's Monday, October 23rd. It's the third mug in our Cats vs. Tiki Icon series, and it was designed and sculpted by Dave Squid Cohen exclusively for us at the Search for Tiki. These are the Tahitian cannibal carvings, and they are getting munched on by this naughty cat. So, guys, be sure to purchase that mug. Any purchase that you make through the searchfortiki.com, it does help us fund 13 Nights of Tiki Frights, and it also keeps the website, The Search for Tiki, free and accessible to Tiki enthusiasts around the world. So if you are able to purchase a mug, thank you so much for doing it. It's not a pre-order. The mugs are on hand. They have finished production. They will ship no later than November. So if you want to get one as a Christmas gift for the Tiki or cat lover in your life, you can do that tomorrow night at 6 o'clock Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. With that said, guys, I'm super excited to talk to Freaky Deaky Tiki. So let's get him in here. What's happening, buddy?
What's happening, brother? Good to see you.
It's good to see you too. I'm excited, man. I've been following you for over a year, and we've talked on Instagram, but this is kind of the first time that we get to actually chat.
Yeah, man. It's all online until now, so I appreciate that.
100%. Thanks for having us, dude. You're among a handful of new mug makers that are just absolutely killing it right from day one. I don't know how you guys are doing it, but congratulations.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate that.
I'm going to see if I can pull up a photo here of some of the work that you've done in the past year. Boom. Look at that. So, I mean, for year one, this is pretty insane, dude. We got the Kong, we got Creech, stickers. And you're a Texas-based artist, right?
Yeah, I'm in Austin. Yeah, not a lot of us out here, but yeah, there's a couple.
That's one of the. It's kind of strange to say this, the Tiki Mecca of Texas, but that's one of the Tiki Meccas that I haven't been to yet. It seems to be flourishing. How's the Tiki community in Texas?
It's great, man. We got Tiki Tatsuya here not too long ago. They were a fantastic addition to the city, and there's also a bunch of great ones around too, not just in Austin. I mean, Hugman's in San Antonio's great, Swizzle's great, Dallas. I mean, there's a bunch of good ones. But obviously, Tiki Tatsuya is my home base here, so it's great.
That's the one at the top of my list. I got to go to Tiki Tatsuya.
Yeah, it's great.
How many times have you been?
I don't know. I don't know. A bunch of times.
Too many times. What's it like going in? For us sad folk that haven't been.
Sorry, I lost you there for a sec. I got
What's the experience of Tiki Tatsuya for those of us that haven't been?
It's really immersive. They've got 2 different floors, so depending on which one you get sat at, it's kind of a completely different vibe, different feel to it. The drinks are all great. They do a lot of their own versions of classics that are true enough to the classics for someone that's a real stickler to still really enjoy them, but also putting their own twist on it. They've got a bunch of originals that are really great too. They've got a great kitchen too. The food's there, it's awesome. So
Is it
yeah,
because
it's worth it.
like adjacent to a ramen shop, right? So is the food all
Yeah.
ramen?
No, the food's not ramen at all. So the same restaurant group owns Ramen Tatsuya. So like that's it's the same. Like there's a set of buildings there, and one's behind the other. So they're connected through the ownership, and they're right next to each other. But it's not the same food or the same anything really.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. And you got to recently vend at Texas Tiki Week. What's that all about? How's Texas Tiki Week?
Great. Texas Tiki Week was a ton of fun. Yeah, I had, since this was my first year, since I opened the business, I launched it on Halloween last year when you did the giveaway of one of my APs for the Kong. So
which,
yeah,
by the way, I think that was the most fun I've ever had trying to take a picture of a mug.
What you came up with was pretty unreal.
Let's see if I can pull it up. It's a little bit extreme, but your mugs
perfect.
are pretty crazy too here. Let's see. Yeah, this is what I came up with for your zombie Kong. And dude, I have to say, I bought way more bananas than necessary.
I saw the other picture you just sent me of like your counter with enough bananas for 3 months on it.
Thankfully, bananas are pretty cheap, although I did feel bad because I was not going to eat any of these bananas after I put, the blood is from like Spirit Halloween, one of those, countrywide things. Yeah, but no, I had so much fun photographing that mug.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, in the last, what was your? I got sidetracked now looking at
Texas Tiki Week.
Bananas in the oh yeah. So I did Dallas Tiki Week actually not too long ago, then I did Texas Tiki Week. So it's the only 2 events I've gotten to do so far. They're both really great. Texas Tiki Week was awesome. It's here in town. They did a ton of events at all the bars and spots around town, and a lot of cool events. It was great. It was great. It was a much bigger thing than I had realized. So that was awesome.
In Texas Tiki Week, I believe, I say this having not been to it yet, but unlike a lot of the other Tiki events that are Tiki weekenders at like a hotel, it's kind of like a week-long event spread out over multiple locations throughout.
It's all over town. Yeah. They'll do pop-up bars from other Tiki bars around Texas and bars that are here in town. So you'll get to like see some of those, even though you're here in Austin. They do one event's like on one of the boats on the lake. I mean, they do a lot of really interesting stuff. And then I did the vending, which was near the very end of it. It was great. Tons of great artists. A lot of them from really close by. I saw artists from other parts of Texas, Louisiana, but a lot of them super local, which was fun.
And here we have your booth.
Yeah, that was fun.
Texas Tiki Week. Now, because you're relatively new, had you met a lot of these people prior to Texas Tiki Week, or was that kind of like the first time you got to meet a lot of these people?
No, I got to meet a few people at Dallas Tiki Week, and I got to meet a few more at Texas Tiki Week. But there's no one really super local that I've been able to communicate with and talk to throughout this process. I had a lot of Tiki community is pretty incredible. I got a lot of great help online. Lots of questions got answered. A lot of people willing to share, which was fantastic. But as far as people close by, no, those 2 events are the only time I've really gotten to branch out and meet some other artists in person, at least.
Yeah. How did you? Taking a step back, how did you get into Tiki in the first place? What was your? Well, I guess even further back than that, what was your exposure to Tiki culture?
Well, so for most of you probably have no idea, my full-time job, I'm a chef, and at a couple places I worked at, I got to start getting involved in cocktail programs. Started really diving into not Tiki specifically, just all types of classic cocktails and trying to learn as much as I could. And just that process is what by default is where I fell in love with Tiki and the cocktails and the whole thing. So after that, I really got more and more involved in some of those programs to the point where I got to have a big part in creating all the cocktails and recipes for the bar. And then and just inherently started becoming a collector on my own too. Started collecting tons and tons of mugs, and then
oh boy, I'm sorry.
And I've always I've always been drawn to art in a lot of different forms growing up. I've always drawn. I've always, music, everything. So early into the pandemic, actually, I got COVID like a lot of people did, stuck at home for a couple weeks with nothing to do. And I just wanted to see what sculpting with some like air dry clay was like. And kind of surprised myself at what I ended up with. And then said, you know what, I'm gonna do a sculpt. And I did the Kong sculpt. And so let me just do a sculpt and see, is this something I think people would even like? So I did that. And then that worked out. I was pretty happy with it. The people that got to see it were pretty pumped.
Pretty happy with it? Was that is that the sculpt that became Kong, or was that?
Yeah, that was the one.
You were pretty happy with it.
Yeah. And then from there, I decided, well, let me just make one mold of it and see what that process is like. And I just kind of kept testing the waters with each stage of the process. And then from there, it worked out really well. So I said, well, I'll silicone it and make master molds, and I'll do like a small production run. And then I did like 40 of them, launched on Halloween, that night last year, and they all sold out pretty quick, which I was just blown away. So then at that moment, I was just committed after that, doing everything I can to, in the small amount of free time I do have, keep production going and try to enter in some other mediums as well, with like designing work for glassware to shot glasses, stickers, pins, cocktails, the works. Yeah. And then that's been it ever since.
If we go back to this photo of your booth, we can see, and we'll talk some more about this later on, but you got your ceramics up here, you got your Mai Tai glasses, you got bitters, which is crazy. I haven't seen too much of that.
Yeah.
Stickers, shot glasses,
yeah,
all kinds of stuff. Prior to you doing Kong, did you have any sculpting experience in the past?
Not really. I mean, I've like played around with it a little bit, but nothing to be taken seriously. I didn't really make an effort at anything until I tried that sculpt. I tried to do Pan from Pan's Labyrinth, the movie, the face.
Okay. I mean, that's a challenging one. That's what you start with.
Well, from day one, I kind of felt like, if it's not the kind of mug that I would be excited to buy, I don't want to bother with making it, and that was kind of it. I didn't want to put something out there that was mediocre. I just didn't think that would have been worth the effort and the work. And I'm a perfectionist anyways. So it just really was one of those things. I spent a lot of time on that sculpt. And yeah, I was happy with it. So it just kind of took off from there.
Do you think that's a chef thing? Being being a perfectionist? Does that come from
100%. Well, I wouldn't say it comes from a chef background. I will say it's in a lot of people who become chefs. They're just inherently that way, because you have to be a little bit like that, to do that.
Yep. Okay, so you decide you're going to do ceramics. It's pandemic, You're sculpting. You end up doing Kong. What was your process for learning how to make tiki mugs, given your limited experience at the time?
A lot of great people gave me a lot of good feedback. I was able.
Maybe we should do some shout outs.
Yeah, for sure. Well, first and foremost, without Van Tiki's Technical Tuesdays, any new mug maker would struggle 1,000 times more than they need to. So that was unreal, having that resource guide, to something like that. But aside from that, there were a ton of great artists. Christine from Ricky Tati was one of them. She was unreal with. I mean, I don't know how she didn't get tired of my questions at some point along the way, but a lot of people in the community. Omar from Oakwash. I mean, tons of people. I would just reach out with questions, and for the most part, everyone I spoke to was just willing to share. And it's sort of the community is great. It's sort of like we're all kind of here to lift each other up. And if someone new is coming along, and I've had a handful, I shouldn't say a bunch, but a handful of people that are getting into it now, asking me a lot of questions. I try to share everything that I know, and Not that I've been doing it a long time, but what I do know, and
Yep.
it's been great. The culture of the community sort of is a big part of how I was able to cross those hurdles in a little bit quicker time than I think, a lot of people might have had to in the past.
Yep. There's this crazy boom in tiki in general, but tiki mugs. And tiki culture is one of those things that has come and gone. It was almost obliterated in the past, just to time. And thanks to some incredible people, Sven Kirsten, Bosco, Beach Bum Berry, Otto, Baby Doe, Shag, others that I'm forgetting. We have tiki culture that came back. But I wonder now that Instagram is around and social media is around, if tiki is more here to stay. Obviously, staring into a crystal ball. But I do think, particularly in tiki mugs, I think we're seeing the influx of tiki mugs because of the interaction between a lot of the mug makers. It's seemingly, I say this as someone who has not made mugs. I've designed mugs, but I haven't made them personally. It seems like it might be a little bit more, the knowledge is a little bit more obtainable these days.
Yeah, it is. I'm the perfect example of that. I had zero knowledge or understanding of any part of the process whatsoever, aside from that sculpture I did. And I was able to get answers to all my questions faster than I was able to go through those steps of the process anyways. So for anyone that wants to learn about it, it's all out there, and anyone can reach out to me or tons of other artists. But Van Tiki put in a ton of work. Heinrich did a ton of work for everybody else to be able to succeed. So we're going to have to be forever thankful to him and everything he's done, because I would venture to guess that you could take a stab at it and do a pretty good job with nothing more than his videos alone, for sure.
That should almost be like a prerequisite. Like, before you contact all these artists, which will help you out, watch Tiki Technical Tuesday. And then if you have questions, reach out. But we want you to keep making mugs.
There's also a lot to be said for him showing you the process instead of someone just telling you.
Yeah. 100%. For you, which aspect of mug making was the hardest to learn? Was there one that stood out more than another?
Yeah, 100%. It was making the master mold, the mold of the actual sculpture. I was so terrified of undercuts. I probably redrew my mold lines on that stupid sculpture 30 times. But again, I had a lot of other artists help me out. Christine was great again. I sent her a lot of pictures and she gave me some feedback. And, there's, like I said, there's a ton of people out there with great knowledge that can help. But definitely doing the mold was new to me, because I kind of understood how working with silicone works. I did a bunch of woodworking in the past, so like working through mold boxes and doing all those steps of the process was not an issue at all. It was plaster. I had never had any experience with whatsoever, so that was the biggest learning curve. But once I did the first one, it was like, okay, I get it now. So like that, the Kong mug takes way longer to trim than than Creech or than my shot glass or anything else, just because it was the first mold I did.
Live and learn.
There was some things that could have been different. I could have done that could have saved me some time during the production process, but it's obviously good enough. I'm able to make them work, but you got to go through it once. It just kind of is what it is.
Yep. You get every tool imaginable to you, but at the end of the day, mistakes are your own, right? And you gotta. That's part of the learning process. Unfortunately, as much as we hate to make those mistakes.
Yeah. And I think the master mold of your sculpture is probably scary for a lot of artists first go at it, because it kind of ruins the sculpture. After if you mess up your mold, it'd be extremely difficult to recast that same thing. You'd have to put a lot of work back into the sculpt, and it may or may not even be doable at that point. So that's probably a part of what makes me say that, for sure.
Okay. I do want to get into some of the nitty gritties of ceramics with you, but before we do that, I am curious. Sure. Looking at your mugs, like this Creech, a theme quickly emerges. It's not terribly difficult to see the theme. So I gotta ask, did you watch a lot of monster movies growing up? Where did
I love horror
the passion
movies.
for monsters come from?
Yeah, I've always loved horror movies, all types of horror movies and thrillers. And I tend to gravitate towards movies with monsters of some form or fashion in them. Yeah, I love it. New ones, old ones, doesn't matter. They're great.
What is it? And this might be a tricky question. I don't know.
Okay.
What is it about monsters that appeal to you?
Well, I think through art, I enjoy like fantastical things. So from movies to any form of art, whether it's paintings or anything else, I really am drawn to anything that's in that fantasy realm. We kind of separated there for a second. I don't know if you heard all that, but
Yeah, no, I did.
okay, good.
Is there a reason you gravitate towards the dark side of the fantasy realm?
I there's not a reason necessarily. That's just what I tend to like. Yeah.
So some Freudian thing, perhaps, that we're not conscious
maybe,
of?
man. I don't have any idea. Halloween's my favorite holiday, kind of always has been. It is for my family, my kids too. Like it just kind of that's the way we all are over here.
All right. And do you have a favorite? Well, this is a two-part. So Universal monster, so the classic monsters, and then do you have a favorite Universal monster? And then beyond the Universal universe, do you have a favorite monster beyond that?
Well, I've kind of done a couple of my all-time favorites already, but as far as just monsters in general go and like things like that, I've always loved any iteration of a clown that's depicted.
Oh God.
Yeah. Always. 1990 It is my favorite horror movie ever, for sure.
Oh boy.
So
oh boy. You're one of those guys.
Yeah. So clowns is one of them. But honestly, it's all of them. Everything from stuff like Jaws to some sort of creature that's been completely created that's not drawn from something else. I mean, I love Godzilla movies. I mean, all of them. Yeah.
Is there a monster you don't like?
I've never really thought about that. I don't think so. No.
Yeah, I like them all.
Yeah. I mean, obviously I like some more than others, but I don't think there's any that I would like that I dislike, or that like I guess some people certain things like clowns. I know is one of them for some people. I don't have that with any one particular type of horror movie or monster. Yeah.
Clowns aren't my favorite, I will say.
Yeah.
But with you happen to be working on one, and is it Chuckles? Is it called Chuckles?
Yeah, Chuckles is what I named him. Pretty happy with the sculpt. So
terrifying, absolutely terrifying.
He will be a shrunken head mug. So I plan on actually stitching the mouth part way and the one eye that's closed after the sculpt with actual like physical products, not part of the sculpture. So it's almost as if
so like mixed media.
Right. So it's almost as if the Chuckles is even with beheading and being shrunken, I guess, is still, you can't stop him. He's coming back. He's like ripping through his stitches. I don't know why my brain works that way, but that's the idea.
As if a clown wasn't terrifying enough, you just got to take it to that next level.
Yeah.
So when you're doing these sculpts, do you do concept designs? Like, are you drawing them out, or are you just hitting the sculpt and going to town?
They all get drawn out first. That's because drawing was something I've always done. I feel super comfortable with that, and they actually became the stickers of these mugs are. I mean, they all. Let me rephrase that. The artwork from the sculpture, like the drawing that I did to create the sculpture, became stickers for all these, and I have them here handy. I can like show a couple of them real quick. So it's a little bit more up close. Yeah, so this guy was the let's see if I can make that. This was the drawing I did for Zombie Kong. So that was the concept art for it. And then this was the concept art I did for there we go. Zombie Creech.
All hail the beloved Creech.
Yeah, I love it. And then of course the clown. I mean, so they're it's not. I don't draw out exactly what the sculpture is going to be. I just get an idea for what I think would look cool, and then a lot of it comes to life in the sculpture. Some bits of it change, things like that. But this is the sticker that was the artwork for the clown, and this is a good example. It's very different from this in the final sculpt, but this is
you
what
can
sort
see
of
the stitching you were talking about, though.
Yeah, yeah. And then the artistry that inspires a mug is the stuff I turn into the enamel pins on the site. So that's why we've got these two, the Kong and the Creech pin, and I'll do the clown too. I'll do Chuckles as well at some point.
When you're sculpting these, everybody has a very strong opinion in the mug making about what material that they sculpt with. Are you using monster clay? What are you using?
I'm only using monster clay all the time.
Okay.
I use medium and hard both. Just kind of depends on what I'm feeling like, but definitely monster clay. And the reason why I love it so much, and I feel strongly about that, as probably a lot of other artists might, is because that it's a wax-based clay, you can come back to it. I don't want to have to worry about the moisture level and keeping a bag around it, and is it drying out? I don't have to worry about any of that. With monster clay, you can come back to it 6 months later if you want to work on it. I don't spend that much time on sculpts, but I do like that aspect of it, that you can just work on it, put it away, especially for me, because this isn't my full-time job yet. So it tends to take me a little bit longer to get through sculpts because I've only got an hour or two in the evening after work or something to kind of work on it. So for that reason, I go with monster clay. That being said, it's a lot easier sometimes to work with just clay itself. But for me, because of my situation, I've used monster clay up until this point. I probably always will now, just because I'm used to it.
Did you try it all dabbling in other mediums, or you just went straight to the monster clay and stuck with it?
No, during that time I was playing around with some air dried clay. I also got my hands on some other clay from a local place, and just the nature of it kind of drying out and having to babysit that is why I just bailed and went with monster clay. Plus, a lot of other great artists were already using it and came highly recommended. And because of that, I just kind of stuck with it.
Okay. Do you think your climate has anything to do with it? Being in Texas, dry, hot. If you were in a different climate, something with humidity, would that change your opinion on it or no?
No, I don't think so. I do all my sculpting inside. My shop's outside, but I do most of the sculpting in the house. But either way, though, I don't think I would. I like. It's almost like because it's harder to carve into, especially because I use hard monster clay more than I use the medium, and I don't use soft at all. It's almost like I don't know. You have to be a little more deliberate about it, and even though that seems counterproductive, I kind of enjoy that aspect of it. You can always. You can addition and subtraction type of art. Like you can always add clay, you can remove clay, you can go back and forth. But specifically with monster clay, it's easier to do that. If the surface starts to dry out on a regular clay body of some kind, it now becomes problematic, And just because I don't have to worry about that is the main reason that I like monster clay.
All right. Are there any unusual tools that you use when sculpting? Things that people might not think to use?
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I use most of the stuff everybody else uses. I've got some great tools for texturing I've found that's used on all the mugs that I've done so far, like from this texture of the skin, on Kong. That's all done by hand after it gets cast. Same thing with Creech. He's got a bunch of it going on. You can kind of see it down through here and some around the eyes and things like that. All that texturing is done by hand. And when I first got going, it was truly done by just by hand. And it was a nightmare. But
so that's not in the mold. That's part of your cleanup process, essentially.
It is, because it's too fine. Because it was in the original sculpt. It just doesn't translate through once you put a few layers of glaze on and everything else, especially because it's pretty subtle. So it's much better for me to do it afterwards. And now that I've found some of these tools for texturing specifically, it definitely speeds up the process a lot. But other than that, no, not really. I mean, for glazing, I do some different things, but for the actual sculpting process, no, it's all pretty standard stuff.
You mentioned earlier one of the scary things of making molds is they can kind of get destroyed, your sculpt in the process. When you say destroyed, like no coming back or potential to touch up?
Well, I think it depends on your sculpt a lot. Because a lot of the sculptures for me tend to happen during the sculpting process, like that the artwork at first gives me a general direction, but so much of it happens during the sculpt that I'm adding things on more than like building it up slowly as I think of things. I'm taking them off, and then because of that, one example is on Chuckles, I redid the way I want the hair to be like 6 times before I figured out what I want it to look like. And because of that, I'm putting on larger pieces and taking them off and trying things. And when I find one that kind of looks good, I'll blend it in and work on it. Well, one of the whole sides of the face came off. It came off in the sculpture, and I was able to get it out of the mold, obviously. But I mean, I don't think it would be great to reapply that. I mean, you could do it. I mean, again, because of the clay body that I use, the monster clay, you can absolutely do it. It just, it's never the exact same, I would imagine. And
then you're kind of disappointed because you have even if it wasn't as good the first time in your head, right?
Oh yeah.
When you're resculpting it, you're gonna have this like grandiose vision of what it was.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and trying to achieve what it was, I think, is at that point what we're trying to do. But not only that, but if any like material from the plaster remains, even just like a thin layer or little bits and pieces, those can become problematic because you can't recast on top of that because plaster sticks to plaster. So it's almost easy. It's way easier if you can figure out a way to just get it right and not have to redo it all. I did recast one piece of the Kong mold. Again, it was my first mold I was doing, and I messed up one piece real bad, and I did have to recast it, and I had to spend a lot of time on one small piece just reworking it and trying to get it perfect before I redid it. And I can't imagine redoing that for the whole sculpture.
Now, when you're doing that, do you just kind of put the other pieces in place in the sculpt and then pour the plaster?
Well, you have to leave them when you're casting your master mold. You leave all the pieces on and you pour one piece at a time. So you can't take them off. So it's sort of like I had to work around the other 2 pieces that had already poured and were set, or 3 pieces. I can't remember what stage it was that I had to do it, but you're just kind of getting in there in between these pieces of plaster and trying to like finesse everything, and it worked out fine. But I wouldn't want to. I wouldn't want to do it for the whole sculpture for sure.
If we take a look quickly back at your Chuckles here, you can see you've kind of drawn some lines. I'm assuming this is what you intended for the mold lines, right?
Those are the mold lines.
So for someone who's new to ceramics, how would you describe undercuts?
Okay. I would say, if we're looking at this glass right here, okay, if you're going to mold the side of this piece, right, you can mold as far back as halfway. But if the mold piece wraps around the back of the glass, when you pull that mold piece off straight forward, if it's wrapped around, you're going to break off those pieces of the mold that are wrapped around behind it. And in any direction, obviously. So you have to think a lot about how that piece you're casting is going to come away from the sculpture. Obviously, you want it to come straight out with this little bit of sculpture or anything else inhibiting it along the way, because even if you kind of can finesse it off your sculpture, when you're casting, that's a lot more fragile product than your original sculpture, which is not hollow. So if you pull straight out and you can tear through the side of a mug, or you can break part of the mold piece, but you're sort of committed after the point of the master mold. That's why it's so important to get that right before you think about replicating that master mold to do production work. And you don't have to, but I mean, you can definitely get some casts out of one mold, but you're limited as to how many, for sure.
And if we pull up Chuckles here again, you can kind of see one of the things, like for me to explain it, is the nose. Oftentimes,
perfect. Yep.
Because the nose, so this is circular, right? So you don't have that issue. But oftentimes people will kind of point the nose down, and if the nose is pointed down, there's a space in behind the nose, and that's gonna tear right off.
Well, not only that, but with this being round like a clown nose, I had to be very mindful of, I couldn't make it sort of in front of the face, because if the mold wrapped around the backside of the nose before going onto the face, it would have torn out. That's why it's sort of round and then stops at the face instead of like being a full circle. If that makes sense.
Yep. All right, so then you're making the mold. Here we have you've got a shot if people are wondering what it looks like. Here's Creech being molded up. And so when you're making these individual pieces, right, usually you got one at the bottom, then you got ones that kind of go around at the sides. The number of pieces changes depending on how many undercuts you have to avoid. But
yeah, absolutely.
How do you create your mold keys? So these circles where the mold pieces fit together.
So each mold is kind of different when you're working through it, but essentially you're either putting a key in a finished piece of plaster, or you're putting a key in a piece of clay. And that picture you pulled up was perfect, because one side was clay and one side was plaster, because I was going to pour the face next. So you can see that on the right side of the screen, I had poured that plaster piece already. So for that, I used a drill with a round bit, like a round router bit, and just real slowly cut out that circle. On the clay side, there's a loop tool I have that's a circle, but you could use anything really to cut that circle out of the clay. Because in the end, I wanted that piece to lock into the sides and I could pull it straight out, when it was done. Alternatively, had I cast, both of them first, the sides first, and they were both plaster, I would use the drill for both, or vice versa if it was clay. But that's really how I do it.
And in theory, when you pour the plaster in there, it's going to fill that crevice and kind of do the reverse image of that dimple.
Exactly. And then that way, when you put the mold back together, it sort of locks it in place so that all your seams are super tight, and you make sure that your final piece is going to work out. It's not going to leak everywhere. Because without those, it'd be too much guesswork for it to be successful. And that's how I do it. It's not the only way to do it. I know, like Mike from Biggs does, like he builds them into the clay with sort of blocks that I know that works really well. So it just depends on preference. That's the only way I've done it so far, but it works.
And how do you keep, so you make the plaster pieces, then you're going to pour more plaster. How do you keep the plaster from just becoming fixed to the other plaster?
Yeah, so I use mold soap. I actually use Murphy's oil soap as one of the tips I got from Tiki. I've bought like dedicated pottery mold soap for this purpose, and it doesn't work as well as Murphy's oil soap. I got a bottle of it actually nearby. I mean, it's just this stuff. You can find it in most any hardware store, but it works well. And I just brush it on. I'll brush it on and buff it out. I'll do that a few times until the surface is a little bit slick, but there's no like thick layers of it anywhere. And I have yet to have pieces stick together, so it works.
Fingers crossed. Yeah. Knock on wood.
I know. Not coming back from that one.
Yep. So I know you do master molds. Before we talk about that, the number of pulls, and when I say pull, basically mugs that you can get out of a mold differs from artist to artist. How many mugs they feel comfortable pulling from a single plaster mold? What do you find the magic number is for you? How many mugs do you get out of a single plaster mold?
I might not get as many as some other artists just because the designs I happen to do have so much detail that the time it takes me to trim to like rework some of that detail back into it is it just becomes not worth it anymore. So
Yep.
I'll probably get 20 to 25 out of a mold. But I mean, depends on the design. If it's got smoother sides, if it has less detail, I mean, you can definitely get way more than that. I could get more than that out of mine, but it starts to lengthen the rest of the process because you're having to fix things every single mug. I mean, if you think about it, if one mug has one defect in it as far as the mold goes, through wear and tear, maybe a piece chips off or something like that, that's one thing you have to then fix on every single casting that comes out of it. So it's almost easier to just repour that piece. For me, at least it is. Especially the picture you've got there, the gills on Creech, that's one where I can lose a lot real quick. Yep. There's so much detail sculpted into the gills.
So is Creech 5-piece mold?
Yeah, all of those is what I'm talking about. You can kind of see it. But yeah, Creech is 5-piece. Chuckles is 5-piece. Kong is 6. The 6 is because the top isn't completely open. There's the brain exposed on one side.
Yep.
And because of undercuts and all the details of the brain itself, I couldn't make it part of the sidewall of the mold. Yeah, so far that's where I'm at. Yeah, 5 pieces for those two, and Kong's got 6. The shot glasses are less than that, but yeah.
Having done this now, Kong was your first, right? 6 pieces.
Yep.
How many hoops would you jump through to avoid 6 pieces? Because obviously, the more pieces that you make, right, the harder it is to clean up a mug, and the more time it's going to take you.
That's true, but I would rather have a couple of seam lines to fix because of an extra piece than that piece have to put a lot of more time into the detail of it because I had to make it more simplistic because of molding. I don't know if that makes sense or not.
Mm-hmm.
I'd rather, and that's one thing that I do that's a little bit different from some artists. I don't really think too much about the molding process when I'm sculpting. All I'm thinking about is making the most badass sculpture I know how to come up with. And then from there, I'll decide the best way to mold it. And sometimes that means more pieces. And sometimes that means I may have to adjust the sculpt a little bit. But I would rather start with what I think is a perfect sculpture where I wasn't inhibited by a future part of the process.
That's a dangerous game, man. You're playing a dangerous game.
Yeah. But so far it's served me okay. That's probably a part of why there's so much detail in my final mugs. But I think that it definitely is why it takes me as long as it does to trim mugs. I know that takes me a lot longer than probably a bunch of artists do, but you know, I like all the crazy detail. I like full color mugs, and you know, that's what I collect. That's what I like to do. So I wanted to make mine sort of the same way. I keep looking over because that's where they're all sitting right here. But yeah.
Your babies.
Yep. There's a few hiding back here.
We love them. We love them. Okay, so you make the plaster mold. You do maybe 20, and then you start losing detail. If someone's just making mugs, you know, they're just starting to get into it, and they want to make mugs, you can stop there and just make 20 mugs, or you know, people like Tiki Rob, they get 150 mugs, but by doing that, they're hand carving, you know, a lot of the details come out. But if you plan on doing a run of 150, 200, 250 mugs, you really should think about doing a master mold.
So like in my case,
going on here.
Yeah, so in my case, like with Creech, even though the 2 colorations are only runs of 50, I wanted to be able to do multiple colors. So for the same reason, I had to do silicone master mold. So silicone mold, basically you cast silicone around each mold piece independently. And you do that before you start wearing into it too much. I know some makers like to cast a few times until they make sure they don't have undercut problems and things like that. But all in all, you don't want to damage it very much. So you want to do this process relatively early. I do mine immediately. But then from there, you can lay those out on the counter and pour plaster in all of them over and over and over again infinitely and make mugs as much as you want. You know, my Kong I'm working through. It's edition of 150. I don't know that I would have, hindsight, I definitely wouldn't have done that as my first one, but having the silicone mold makes it so that I can get through that process. Same thing with Creech. You know, I'm do these two colors. I put them away after these two colors. I'm sort of done with Creech for as long as I'm not planning on anything else. But if down the road, you know, I want to revisit it and do a super limited edition and do like 15 silver screen edition ones or something weird like that, I have those silicone molds to go back to. And then once you're totally done with that design, that's when you would trash the silicone. But until then, it'll last forever. The silicone part will, at least.
Yep. One of the things that I hear a lot, and this again coming from someone who hasn't actually, made one of these molds, is that the silicone is cost prohibitive. Is silicone, is the price of silicone exaggerated? Should new mug makers avoid it due to the cost? What is it? What is silicone actually?
Silicone actually is a necessary evil if you want large production. If you want large production. For me, I originally wasn't planning on doing silicone with Kong because I was just feeling my way through the process. I just fell in love with every part of it. And I knew that this was going to be something I would continue. I would say to any newer maker out there, I wouldn't start buying tons of silicone until you're committed to the process. It's necessary once you get to that point, unless you're going to be constantly making new designs, which there's some makers that do that. But for me, I like when mugs will come out with like a second coloration later on, and you can like revisit that design years down the road or whatever. And I also like the idea of, I work so hard on it up to that point. It seems like it'd be counterintuitive to like only do one mold. At least with siliconing it, you have the option. But if you're going to go through production and start a business and you want to sell these things, like legitimately move product, it is kind of necessary. It is crazy expensive. I mean, it's wildly expensive, but it is somewhat reusable. Like for mine, I cut up old molds and things I'm not using anymore. You can use those pieces, and as you're pouring a new mold piece, you can tuck them down in there and they will fuse together. So it is, the cost up front is a lot, but you can reuse it eventually once you get to a point where you're getting rid of old designs or trim work or anything like that. But that's, hit or miss, I guess.
Hit or miss. Yeah, and based on what your goal or objective is, if you're just making some for your friends or maybe a wedding party, then you don't need to do it. If you're doing a business, then you kind of do.
Let's say I got a call from a bar that wanted to do, 50 mugs for a grand opening, and it was a pretty simplistic design. I thought pretty confidently I'd get 50 out of one mold. I don't know that I would do it. I don't think it's worth it. But there is a threshold of diminishing returns on your molds, and that's just something to think about. Now, with that being said, even as you start getting little pitting or pieces chip a little bit on your details of your plaster mold, it's not that mold doesn't work anymore, unless you drop it on the floor or something. Obviously, you could still kind of use it. It just is going to take you more and more and more time during your trim process to get it back to what it was originally. So I would say silicone's necessary if you want to do larger production. But if it's a mug that, you're only doing 40 or 50 of, and it's a very simple design, you could find a way to make that work for sure. If it's a more complicated design, maybe 25. It just kind of depends.
Here's something that's kind of cool that maybe you can walk us through.
Yeah.
Here, hold on. So if you look at the bottom of this Zombie Creech mug that we're going to give away, this is like super clean. It looks fantastic. It's super professional, really fine details. And you figured out a way to do this. I've got some photos. Can you just kind of walk us through how you do these insanely detailed logos on the bottom?
Yeah, this came from me not knowing how to do it, not knowing how mug makers do the bottom of mugs. So I kind of had to figure a lot of it out on my own. So what I chose to do, and I don't know anyone else that does it this way, and I don't even know if I would recommend it. It may be a way better way to do it. This is all I've figured out so far, and I just liked it so much on the Kong. I've continued it for the both. Chuckles was done the same way. Little less detail, 'cause it's a smaller logo on the Chuckles one, but same concept. Basically, when I'm building the armature for the original sculpture, I glue what I want the relief size to be in the bottom of that mug that you just showed. Whatever the diameter of that relief size is, I glue 2 pieces of 1/4-inch plywood sandwiched together that are the same exact shape to the bottom of the PVC pipe or whatever I'm using for the armature.
Okay.
And then I will, I'm getting a notification on here about our stream. There we go. I would then start building the sculpture and do the whole thing. When the sculpture is done and it's in the mold and I cast everything, the last piece that I pour is the bottom. So I'll flip the whole finished casted primary, like, yeah, this just like that. Perfect. From there, I will pop off the bottom of the 2 pieces of the 1/4-inch plywood, and that gives me that 1/4-inch relief. So from there, I'll just use clay to sort of clean up any edges or fill any screw holes or anything that, like, you can kind of see in that one. And I'll go ahead and pour it with no logo. There's no logo in there at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So I have that positive indent on the bottom piece, which creates the negative relief in the slip casted mug in the end. Well, once that's done, I'll take that piece, and this is before you create silicone molds, obviously, and I want to carve into it the logo. So what I'll do is I'll use some sort of, like, Procreate is typically what I'll lean on for most of my digital art. And I'll create whatever the logo is going to be. You can actually see it there on the left. I'll create the logo, and then I'll reverse the image so it's backwards. And then I use transfer paper like you find at most craft stores. And I will put the transfer paper in between that logo, which is taped to the base. And just like that. Yep. And then I'll use most of these crafting stores, you can find the transfer sheets with some sort of little tool for transferring it. This is what just mine came with, but you could use most anything. And I just trace the outline really slowly of the entire image. Then when I remove the transfer paper and I remove the logoed sheet of paper, you can faintly see it on there. Now you carve it out. And this is where you obviously got to be real careful because you don't get a second shot at it. But yeah, that tool is just a ball on the end of it. And anyone who does sculpting of most any kind will know what this tool is. This one came with the transfer sheet, oddly enough, but you buy them through normal sculpting, means too. But I'll just go real lightly over and over and over again. It slowly pulls away that plaster. And the only trick here is just making sure that you don't break any pieces because it is pretty detailed, but also you don't want to go deeper than that relief because then the mug won't sit flat on the surface. So you just slowly go over it until all of that's carved out. And then inside the mold, you'll see, what is the reverse image of what the final image will be. Then when you cast it, your slip fills all the stuff you've carved out. And then that's the image flipped around so you can see what it would look like on the bottom of a mug. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that's it. And that
I love it, dude.
Really just comes from Mochi Mikey does he did one similar, and I saw like some images of it on his site, so I kind of took that idea of it from him, and I creating the relief with the plywood genuinely is just because didn't know how else to do it. I got to that point of the process and I realized it's the first time I had thought about it. I was ready to do the sculpture and I had my monster clay. I was ready to go, and I'm trying to think through the whole process ahead of time. And immediately I'm like, oh no, how do I create the bottom of the mug? And I thought, well, I'd maybe carve it out of the clay, and that didn't seem super like it was going to come out very clean. I just wasn't sure. And then that's the best I could come up with. And it worked. So I've just done it ever since.
Dude, those are the little things that I love seeing, on people's Instagrams and stuff, because it's those things that you just kind of like ponder in your mind, like how the heck did they do this?
Yeah. Well, I thought
cool
about
that you share that stuff.
Yeah, I thought about doing you can get pottery stamps, for clay bodies. Like before it dries, you would just like indent into it, and that would have been easier, obviously. But I kind of thought it was neat to have it be a reverse image on the bottom of the mug, just something a little bit different, than being indented into the base.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we're somehow almost an hour has already gone by.
Oh wow!
How are you on time?
I'm fine. I got nothing. I'm
okay.
Here. I'm hanging out. Yeah.
Let's talk a bit about glazing.
Okay.
If we can.
Sure.
So first of all, why do you use a tester instead of a mug?
Okay. Well, the reason that I use glaze testers, and oddly enough, the shot glass, those you could tell that's the same as the shot glass. When I created that sculpt, it was for glaze testing for my shop. I just happened to look at it one day and go, "Oh man, that's a shot glass." So I started casting it, and it worked out great. But prior to that, it was only a glaze tester. I like doing it that way because it's materials cost money, obviously, and trimming whole mugs, especially with my designs, take a long time, and it's easy to just knock out 12 of those of all different colors that I think could look good. Glaze them all up real quick. I don't have to worry about all the different steps involved with glazing. Each one gets its own color and I move on. And then that way I can kind of just look at them all independently, because things come out different after they get a clear coat, after they get fired. So I would rather do 12 glaze testers all at once and have them all in front of me than have to make a ton of different mugs with a whole bunch of different combos. So what I like to do is take all these glaze testers, then I'll look at those colors, and of those, I'll do a couple of APs, but I start off with a way better headspace as far as what I think could work. And that's why I'll only do a few APs. I don't really need more than that usually, because I've sort of ruled out a lot of stuff already.
Okay. Do you keep all of the glaze tests from previous? I was doing that. I was doing that at first. I have a few of them, but honestly, when you do full color mugs like I do, it's hard to use regular glaze for your colors instead of underglaze, because a lot of regular glazes can tend to run. They have a lot of movement when they're getting fired. And there's so much like precise lines and things I try to stay within the sculptures, like the wounds going down across the face of Creech or things like that, that if I used other glazes, the movement becomes problematic. Yeah. So with underglazes, it makes it a little bit easier to do that. But with regular glazes, it's a whole different deal. That's a whole different ball game. I've done a few one-offs like that I've sold here or there, but typically I love the full color stuff, and underglazes just works best for me. Is there anything to keep in mind, someone who's just starting to make mugs, when choosing glazes?
I lost you there for a second. Sorry about that. I got you back now.
Is there anything to like a new mug maker should keep in mind when they go to the ceramic store and they're choosing glazes, like which glazes to put on their mug?
The only thing I would say is that there's two things I guess I would say. One is make sure that the glaze matches the clay body as far as firing temperature. That's super important. Because they sell glaze that are, low fire, high fire, all kinds of things. So it depends on your clay body. And then sometimes for me, the clay body will be dependent on the glaze I want to use. So it just be mindful of that. And then the other thing would be that movement. I have some glazes here that I play around with on mugs sometimes that you can't use it without some sort of catch plate or something under it, or they're just going to glue themselves to your kiln shelf because you're never going to get it back in one piece. But typically that kind of stuff it's on the labels pretty clearly. And then the other thing I would say is if you are not using underglazes, really most most shops will have test tiles there, so you can see what the final color will look like on an actual tile, because it doesn't always translate to what the pictures will show you online for a certain glaze. But you know, at least at the places I've been to, you can like see it right there firsthand, know exactly what it's going to look like on your mug. And that's helpful. But for underglazes, they're pretty true to color once they get the clear coat on them.
I've got a picture here. Maybe you can explain, because glazing is a complicated thing, and it's something that a lot of artists struggle with. So right here, there's a lot going on with these mugs.
Yeah.
What's the status of these mugs, and why are you doing it the way that you're doing it here?
So everything in this picture is right before I put any glaze on it at all. So there are a couple different products you can use to sort of shield your mug from getting glaze on them, right? The easiest of the options is obviously tape, right? Depending on the part of the mug and how easy it is to get tape there, you can just put tape there.
And this is just regular, like painter's tape.
Yeah, that's all I use. And that's what's on top, on the skull portion. The red that you see there is a product that you can actually remove. I'm trying to find, I've got it right here. I'm going to stand up for 1 second and grab it. Let's see. Okay, this one isn't the red one, but it's just a different brand. So this right here is called, let's see if I can get it here, liquid latex. There's a bunch of brands out there. They basically do the same thing. You paint it on, and it turns into just a real thin layer of latex that you can peel off. That's another method to keep glaze off of a certain area of the mug. And you might want to do that because, like for some parts of it, maybe you want the actual color of the fired clay, the bisque clay, the white, to stay white. Or maybe it's because you want to apply a glaze to that part later that's lighter in color than the stuff you sprayed first. There's a lot of reasons you might want to do that. So like on the Kong, that's all stuff that's bone. It technically would be bone. So that's why I wanted it to stay white. And then the green parts on the barnacles of Creech, that's called wax resist. Wax resist it does the same exact thing, but it cooks off in the kiln. So when you fire it, it comes off. So the idea there is that you don't have to go back and remove it before firing it, because you don't want to fire the liquid latex on there. So the way I kind of look at it is, if I have multiple steps of the glaze process before it gets fired, I'll use liquid latex. So one example would be on Creech. Those were sprayed because the eyes on Bayou Creech, and a lot of people don't know this, and I didn't advertise it too much because it's not crazy strong. That's the first edition, but on the Bayou one, the eyes, that glaze glows in the dark. The one you've got.
No way.
Yeah. So it's not crazy intense, but it absolutely works. So for that one, it was important that there was no glaze under it. So that's why I did the liquid latex, because I wanted to spray it and then remove it. Also with the other Creech that you just put the image of, the first one, which I've got a first edition here. I've got a few left of these, not many. The yellow of the eye, when I was testing, it doesn't really come through like I wanted it to if I tried to do it over the green. So it was important that I use the latex so I could peel it off and then put the yellow on over the white clay body. Yeah, instead of over the green, because the yellow is such a lighter color, it kind of came through too much.
So is it kind of like the same with paint, where it's easier to go darker than it is to go lighter? So
100%. So like the wounds, the ones across the face, and then the kind of like meaty, gross bits, because those are reds instead of a light green, I just paint those and glaze those straight over the green without issue. So it just kind of depends. You find a lot of that stuff out throughout the process. But for me, if I'm going to be doing multiple steps of glazing that use that part before it gets fired, I'll use latex. And if I'm just I want it covered until it gets fired, I'll use wax resist, because it'll just cook off in the kiln. I don't have to think about it again. That's what I did with the barnacles.
Okay. So how many?
Yeah.
With the example of Creech here, how many kiln firings does Creech go through?
Creech gets 3 firings. So you don't have to bisque fire your stuff. That's up to the artist. I wasn't doing that for a long time with Kong, but I broke a few, one too many. I just had enough. So after that, I started bisque firing it. The glaze, for at least in my experience, adheres a little bit better to the mug the underglaze, at least on greenware before you bisque fire it. So every now and then I get a mug or two that's problematic after firing it, where the glaze isn't adhering great, and will have to get rid of it. But it's pretty rare. But I'll bisque fire, and then I do all of the underglazing, and then I fire that, and then I'll do the black wash. Any colors that may or may not need to go over the black wash, like the blood spatter on Kong's face. That's after it got dipped, yeah. And then after that, it gets a clear coat, and I do the interior, and then I fire it for that 3rd time.
And the clear coat, that's what makes it feel right as a mug, right?
Yeah, that does. And you don't have to do that. You may have a design that, let's say you're doing something that's like supposed to look like rope or something that's supposed to have texture. You don't have to do it by any means. I know a bunch of artists do and don't, depending on the design. I've done it on both of these. I use a matte clear, so it's not super shiny on the outside. But yeah, you can get that like high gloss sort of a thing, or matte, or somewhere in between.
Mm-hmm. All right, one of those questions that I ask every mug maker that comes on here, it started with Henrik Van Tiki, who's come up a couple times, as he always does. He hates opening the kiln, the mystery of it, because the kiln gods can be cruel. Where do you stand on this question? Do you look forward to or hate opening the kiln?
I look forward to it way more after underglazes than I do the clear coat, but I'm always excited about it. Honestly, I'm not ever too worried about it, because if something goes wrong, it was kind of going to go wrong anyways. And it's usually a pretty good learning experience if that happens. But for me, I'm always excited to get in there. So I don't, I don't see it negatively, really. And by the time I'm doing a large batch production of something, I'm pretty confident in the process and things not being a major issue. The only time I've ever been worried about it was when I was testing Creech. I ran into a few colors that the glaze was chipping off the mug a lot. But it turned out to be a bad batch of glaze that I had gotten. And once I was able to identify that, I did a couple extra testers just to be sure. I was pretty confident, but that one was a little nerve-wracking, but turned out to be fine. But I've known a couple makers recently that have had an almost entire run of mugs get ruined because of a bad batch of glaze that you just don't know until it comes out of the kiln. So it can be nerve-wracking for sure. But either way, I'm excited to see it.
In this photo, right, you can see, you've got quite a few stacked in here. So if something went wrong, that would be a lot of work down the drain. When you're doing mugs in the beginning, do you fire, just a couple, and then you do the larger runs, or how do you divide that work up?
When I get one AP from start to finish that's good to go every step of the way, because I'll refire the same colors if I need to, like just to figure out the process until it's perfect. Yep. Then I don't worry anymore, and I'll do the whole thing. But even then, I'm doing it in stages too. From like first is just, well, right now first is bisque, then it's just underglazes. But once you get done with clear coat and everything's coming out of the kiln, it's not a whole lot you can go back and fix at that point. So it's nerve-wracking, but I am always excited to get in there and see what's going on.
We've got a shot here of one of the sad zombie Kongs that didn't make it. This looks like it was pretty early in the stages. What percentage of mugs have you found don't make the cut, and how does that affect price point?
Well, I would say for me, in my relatively limited experience so far, I probably lose maybe 3 to 5% in the casting process. It's not very much. And that's what that one was. Something happened who knows? I can't remember anymore what happened with that one, but that's just during casting and trimming and that kind of thing. As far as firing goes, I think every time I do a full kiln load, which for me is probably 35 or 40 mugs tops in one kiln, depending on which mug design and what the combination is. I've had plenty where the whole thing works out, but I've had a couple where they didn't. I would say if it is a run where I do have complications, it'll only be a couple of them. So not too many, at least so far.
Fingers crossed, knock on wood.
Yeah. I have had to refire a couple of times after the final firing to touch up like the interior, because you want to make sure that's completely coated so it's safe to use, obviously. But other than refiring for something like that, there's not a whole lot you can really do. But yeah, I've lost a couple here and there. Nothing crazy. Probably, like I said, maybe 2 or 3 at most if I had any problems at all.
That should put some confidence in someone who wants to start making mugs. Sometimes you hear the ceramic stories and it sounds terrible and like something you don't want to do. But it's nice to know the reality is not these catastrophic failures happening all the time. It's
you know what, if you follow all the steps and do as much research as you can about the process along the way, you're able to avoid a lot of that stuff. Things like sifting your slip because there's no other like weird little bits of things in there that might blow up in the kiln, and you're making sure that you're wiping the bottom of the mugs away so that you don't get them gluing themselves to the kiln shelves. I mean, these things can happen with ease, but as long as you kind of inform yourself and you're relatively careful about the process, it's not terrible. If you have something catastrophic happen for like a whole batch of mugs, typically there's something wrong with a product you bought that was out of your control.
Okay. So ceramics, you make the mugs, you got to sculpt them, you got to make the molds, you got to make master molds, you got to pour the slip, then you're glazing, then you're firing 3 times if it's creech. It changes depending on mugs. But then you got to sell them, right?
Yep.
That's a whole other kettle of fish. What
is.
platform has been the most useful to you growing your ceramics business?
Yeah. I pretty much only do anything on Instagram, honestly. I've yet to create a Freaky Deaky Tiki page for Facebook or anything like that. I started to think about going through Etsy store kind of thing. That just wasn't something I was real interested in at the time. So instead I do all like social media through Instagram only. And then I have a website that I sell through. I don't use Etsy or any of those kind of places. So I've got my own website that I actually do selling through. Unless it's a weird one-off or an AP, I might do an auction or a giveaway or something through Instagram. But yeah, most everything else is done through the site that you got pulled up there.
FreakyDeakyTiki.com, guys. FreakyDeakyTiki.com. You can check it out. He's got a ton of stuff on here that you can actually purchase right now.
I have a few of everything right now. Looking at my numbers right now, I've got 6 or 7 edition 1 creaches left, and then that'll be it for that colorway. I've got a few more Bayou edition, and only a very few number of the shot glasses that are the different colors. I do have a decent amount of the all gray ones. And then I got plenty of Mai Tai glasses and bitters and all that kind of stuff. Stickers, pins, everything else.
Looking through these, I like the look of this guy right here, the Bloodlust vinyl sticker. Can we? Is there hope for maybe one of those mugs eventually?
Yeah, I mean, there's no way I could not do some iteration of Nosferatu at some point. 100%. I've got sometimes my battle is too many ideas I want to do, and since this isn't my full-time job, it's getting through them. But I do have plans for that. I've got plans for a skull mug I want to do. I've got plans for a zombie. Obviously, I would have to do at some point, and I'm excited about that. a couple other surprises. I've even got an idea for a Bob mug. I think would be kind of cool with my style to it. So yeah, but Nosferatu is definitely on the list. All the major monsters are on the list eventually. I'll probably do some iteration of a Wolfman at some point, like a werewolf. I want to get them all. I want to get them all done at some point. Yeah.
Is there yeah. I'm just thinking about all the different monsters.
Yeah.
There's so many options out there.
For me, I think the thing is trying to, I always want to, walk this line and work within this realm where they're not just monsters. There's some sort of nod to the Tiki realm. So that's why, obviously a zombie is so prolific in Tiki and Tiki drinks and Tiki culture, like in some respects, I guess. But that's why I sort of zombified Kong, And then it was Creech. I wanted to zombify Creech only because obviously Creech is in a lot of people's Tiki bars and things like that in some form or fashion. Yep. But I wanted to do a version I hadn't really seen done like that yet. And then with Chuckles, it's like I really want to do this like horrifying clown, but at the same time, how can we do that? Well, like I as a collector myself, I love shrunken head mugs. I've got a whole bunch of them. They're all different kinds. So I was like, well, that'd be kind of a cool way to do the clown, but still kind of fit, in this theme for some people. So everything I do will have that in mind. It won't ever just be like, I'm just making only monsters just for the sake of making monsters. I try to be mindful of that.
We have someone in the comments, Blood Rage Engage says Skeksis.
Yeah.
Paper
actually
Stove wants to do a collab.
I sent him a message. We were talking back and forth. And Dark Crystal is one of my favorite movies from my childhood. That gives you a little bit of like insight into the weird stuff that I liked as a kid. But for me, it would be really cool to do a Skeksis. But I don't know if that's for everyone. And I'd be struggling with finding a way to bridge that gap. I don't just want to recreate someone else's thing and just sell it. So it would have to be, How can I tether it to Tiki? How can I make it my own? But it would be cool to do one day for sure.
It's a challenge, but it would be cool. Challenge, but it would be cool.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, there are, it goes to what you're talking about already. There are a lot of creature mugs out there. Creature from the Black Lagoon is just, monsters in general. People that are obsessed with Tiki tend to like monsters too, even though they're not technically, there's nothing inherently Tiki about monsters. Creature from the Black Lagoon more so. So I think that's why he's done so much. But
that like silver screen movie era, I think tend to gravitate sometimes. That's what I like too.
Tiki's very Hollywood. We talked a little bit about it with Sven Kirsten last year. You can go back and watch that video. But is there anything you do differently than other mug makers to make your mug stand out? Anything that you're just super proud of?
I would say not something that I necessarily do different on purpose in any regard, but part of me deciding to do this was not just can I create a sculpture that I think other people might be into that I would like, but also that the style just is a little bit different, that wasn't forced. So I just started sort of working it within what I thought was cool. And it seems different from a lot of the other stuff out there, just stylistically. So for me, that was one. And I'm a big fan of a bunch of mug makers out there, obviously, but the ones I tend to gravitate to the most have a definitive style that you can tell. Like, okay, like I'm not surprised to hear that this is one of his mugs or her mugs. And I feel like mine is a little bit more of my own style, and there's not a ton out there that's super reminiscent of it. Monk Tiki's got some great stuff over the years that, I draw inspiration from simply because I'm a huge collector of their stuff too. But I would say my style is a little bit different than some of the other stuff that's out there. But other than that, no, as far as process-wise go, everything I know, I got help from someone else. And, you pick and choose pieces along the way. I lean a lot on airbrushing for glazing. That was one thing I picked up on that was a big help early on. But other than that, no, I'm it's pretty much the same routine as most others, aside from just your own style getting put into it.
Ceramics has been pretty fine tuned over thousands of years. You look back at the archaeological records, and ceramics are some of the earliest things we have. So that process is pretty locked in.
Yeah. I was gonna say that, and that all my stuff is full color. You know, that I spent a lot of time in the glazing process because of that. You know, I could absolutely do the same designs and a single color and a wash or something like that and get them out faster, sell them for a little bit cheaper. But I collect mugs that are big and bold in their designs and color schemes and things like that. So that's the way that I like to make them too.
I think that's a natural progression too of just collecting mugs. Is you start, you know, with some of the mementos from tiki bars, the more affordable ones,
sure,
single color glazes. But at the end of the day, a person only has so much shelf space, right? Or at least I only have so much shelf space. So you reach that point where it's you get that one in, one out, you know, mug policy, and at that point, in order for something to enter the collection, it's got to have multiple colors. It's got to be cool.
Got to be worth it.
It's got to stand out. With that said, we are running on overtime. There's one couple last things I want to talk to you about before we wrap this up. Two things right here. The Freaky Deaky Tiki bitters. I want to know how that came about. And then also kind of tucked in on your website is the Freaky Deaky Tiki digital cocktail book that people can check out. How did those projects come around?
Well, I guess we'll start with the bitters first. So that one was, I've had a couple bottles of bitters now from the Black Lagoon Room does their own bitters with Bitter Cube. And I thought that was really cool. Like, I've had those for a while now. I'm on my second bottle, but I started thinking about that process, and I was just wondering what all went into that. And I thought, hell, you know, like, I don't know how that works. Like, I through my my work now, I actually know someone who knows someone that works for Bitter Cube, and they were able to help me get connected to this person. I kind of told them what I was looking to do, and they said, you know, we'd love to get on board. They sent me a whole bunch of different bitters of theirs.
Oh, there you go.
And then basically use all of their products to create our own blend, and then give them that recipe that I created, and then they produce, ship them to me, and then I sell them out. So it's a pretty simple process.
Nice.
It was exciting. I spent a lot of time tweaking that. It's very sort of citrus and Caribbean spice forward, and it has like a demerara sugar, blackstripe molasses, sort of an undertone at the end. It's not sweet, but that's sort of like a flavor profile. It's great. My goal was to create something that if you had a pretty classic cocktail that you wanted to just give a little bit of like tropical feel to, you could sub it out for Angostura pretty easily. But I also wanted to create something that if you're specifically making tiki drinks, it would work in most cocktails that wasn't problematic, but still gave enough to it to where it was like really worth putting it in there. And I think we did pretty good with creating that. Typically at the last two shows I did, at least, I'll have a bottle out there for people to try it, you know, and they can just kind of give it a taste, and that does pretty well for me. I circle back around after getting a chance to try it. But yeah, that was a ton of fun.
Have you turned into one of those people at the malls, you know, with the perfume stands, like, come and try these bitters?
I feel like it. I just put it out there with a try me sign, and hopefully people try it. So far it's been pretty good. I'm really happy with how it turned out. I feel like it does both the things we were trying to do pretty well, you know. And also, you know, there's Bitterman's does a great tiki bitters. I have theirs, but I wanted something that hits different notes of tiki than what theirs does. So it's not the same flavor profile at all, but both fit really well within that realm. So that was another part of it too. But no, it was really great. So that was the bitters. And then as far as the cocktail book goes, back when I was at a couple of the other properties I worked at for my full-time job, where I was helping with cocktail programming, I also taught the cocktail classes there with one of my other chefs that worked with me. And we would teach all the cocktail classes. And whenever we did those classes, they were always half originals and half cocktails that were specific to whatever we were discussing. So we did several classes that were themed around certain spirits, or we did several classes that were themed around certain styles of cocktails. And so I had a lot of compiled stuff over a long period of time of just original cocktails, and then also working on the actual cocktails for the bar. I had a lot of content there too. Got obviously a lot of feedback from guests at the time, and over time, because I started gravitating more to tiki, I started creating more tiki's based cocktails. And then over time, I started to have enough content that it was like, okay, I started selling like a digital cocktail, like volume. There were volumes, and there were small amount of content, 10 recipes or something like that. And my goal was to create something that people didn't have to pay a ton of money for because it was digital. For really low cost, you could just download it and you had it at your disposal. So I did that a few times with a few volumes. And then eventually I just said, you know what, like I've got almost enough content here. If I put a little work into it, I'll be able to do a full length book. And that's really what that is. It's got, I think, over 30 cocktail recipes. It's over 70 recipes total when you think about all the different syrups and orgeats, and I mean, it's all in there. If any ingredient that's in there, aside from specific spirits or liqueurs, there's a recipe to make it. And that I put that together, and it's a digital cocktail book. So again, I did that to keep the cost down as much as possible. So there's no production necessarily that has to go into that. So there's a lot of content in there. So put that together. I put that on the site not too terribly long ago. That's several months back now. But prior to that, like I said, it was some short form volumes. But now it's a full length book for sure.
So once again, guys, decky.com. You can buy all kinds of cool stuff, including that cocktail book that he was just talking about, digital cocktail book. There's the Coming Soon Chuckles the Shrunken Head. You've got Zombie Creech here. You've got his Creeping Creech Mai Tai glass, Zombie Kong. You got the Bitter Cube bitters. There's the digital cocktail book and all kinds of pins and stickers. So give Freaky Deaky Tiki some love. With that said, dude, I think it's time. What do you think?
Let's do it. Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, all right, guys. We're going to take a quick, closer look at the mug, and then we're going to announce the winner. All right, guys, here it is. Here's the mug. And the winner of tonight's mug giveaway is, congratulations to Amy Prohaska. You have won the Bayou Edition Creech mug. Please send me an email at admin@searchfortiki.com within 14 days. That's admin@searchfortiki.com to claim your prize. And congratulations, Amy. You have won the mug. We'll have another giveaway go live tomorrow. As always, we do giveaways throughout the month of October. Thanks to our sponsors. We've got Plantation Rum here. We could not do 13 Nights of Tiki Frights without Plantation Rum, so thank you to you guys. We're also sponsored by Tiki Farm, the world's largest manufacturer of high-end cocktail mugs. Holden Westland was on the show earlier this month. Awesome, dude. Go back, watch that show. Thank you to Tiki Farm for supporting the Search for Tiki Day 1. And then also Don the Beachcomber. Thank you to Don the Beachcomber for sponsoring 13 Nights of Tiki Frights. Don the Beachcomber is coming back to Florida in a big way. The official Don the Beachcomber, the real brand. They've announced a phased opening in multiple locations over multiple years. And we got to talk to Marie King, who is their beverage manager, earlier this month as well. So go check that video out, learn about the upcoming Don the Beachcomber resurgence. And Freaky Deaky Tiki, thank you so much for joining us. If people, we know where to buy stuff, freakydeakytiki.com. If people want to go to follow you, you said primarily Instagram here.
I put everything up there, all the process work, all the upcoming projects, everything.
You can see Chuckles the Clown coming soon here. So guys, give him a follow on Instagram. Freaky Deaky Tiki is his handle on Instagram. Show him some love. I'm hoping that you do more of these This one here. By the way,
yeah. So that's in the works. So I started a run of mugs, Kongs that were like an artifact series, and the idea was that like every artifact is going to look and have a story based on where it was found and this kind of a thing. And I got buried in all these other projects, but I'm coming back to it, and that's going to be one of them for sure. I loved how that one turned out.
Creepers Cove says year 2 is going to be epic, brother. And I got to say, if it's
Thanks,
anything
man.
like your
Appreciate
first
it.
year, dude, I got to agree.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm excited to keep going, see where this thing goes.
You're knocking it out. You're doing an awesome job. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
It's been an absolute pleasure, dude. We'd love to have you on sometime in the future. I hope you have
I'm
happy
in.
Halloween.
Yeah, you too, man. It's going to be fun.
With that said, guys, we're going to have one final announcement. And that is, of course, the mug I've been drinking out of tonight. This is called the Catable mug. It was designed and sculpted by our good friend Squid, Dave Cohen, exclusively for the Search for Tiki. This mug goes on sale tomorrow. That's Monday, October 23rd. It's a limited edition of 500 mugs. It's $64.99 plus shipping. And it's the third in our Cats versus Tiki Icons series. This is not a pre-order. It's been in the works for 2 years. And it will ship by the end of November. So if you place an order today, you are guaranteed to get it in time for Christmas. So it's perfect for the cat or tiki lover in your life. Please consider supporting the Search for Tiki and 13 Nights of Tiki Frights by purchasing a Catable Tiki mug. Of course, the website is funded through our mug sales in addition to our sponsors. So if you like what we do and you want to keep the Search for Tiki free for Tiki enthusiasts around the world, purchase a Catable mug tomorrow, starting at 6 p.m. PDT and 9 p.m. Eastern Time. With that said, guys, thank you so much for joining me again on 13 Nights of Tiki Frights. Our next live will be on Tuesday, and it's going to be a good one. So we'll see you soon.